reason that I'm here is because the club is seeking change.
He said, well, whether you come or not, you're going to see a completely different Spurs team under me.
My hope and my desire and what I'm going to try and do is give our supporters hope and belief that we're going to embark on something special.
Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. I am your host, Andrew. You can follow me at Stedka. You can follow us at Tottenham Depot. This is episode 221, and we've got a few missed opportunities to discuss for Tottenham Hotspur on both the men's and women's side for this week, and a few other news and notes, figures as well. Got Caroline alongside to chat this week. She's at CG Stefko. Caroline, what is going on with you on this fine Sunday?
Well, I want to wish everybody a happy Oscar Sunday to all who celebrate. It does feel like a month has passed since the men's game because I have been fully in movie mode. So I may struggle to recall some details on that game, but yeah, it does seem like Manchester, the city of Manchester, finally got one over on Spurs. So we'll get into it.
They finally figured it out. I've definitely been in movie mode as well. In fact, I'll pull the curtain back a little bit for the listeners or the viewers if you're watching on youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. We pretty much in our little before we started recording our little pre-show chat, we were just talking about movies and what we haven't seen, what we still want to see before the Oscars take place this evening. And we were just kind of chatting movies, not even really talking about Spurs because it's not the best of subjects this week. 2 defeats, both to Manchester City on the men's and women's side. We're going to get into those. And as you mentioned, they finally got one over on us on the men's side. So the Spurs were 5-0 and looking to go 6-0 against the Manchester clubs this season, but it was not to be in a 1-0 defeat earlier this week. That is certainly one we're going to have to dig a little bit into and remember what happened. Just as you mentioned, it was earlier in the week, but I kind of want to start on the women's side. Before we get into any of that, I do want to remind folks to head over to digitalspurs.com for some Tottenham merch for yourself. This is Danny Garrison's art that he puts to merch. We're talking t-shirts, hoodies, crew necks, hats, all kinds of different things. We love Digital Spurs. Head on over to digitalspurs.com and let them know that we here at the Tottenham Depot sent you. As we mentioned, Spurs women, this was an interesting one to watch this morning because you go into a match against Manchester City and you're thinking, all right, when are Bunny Shaw's 3 goals going to come against Spurs? Because that's kind of always what Spurs are facing when they go up against City and Bunny Shaw. But Bunny Shaw did not appear on the score sheet in this match, but City still do get the victory 2-1 over Spurs women. This was a really entertaining match. I watched this over a cup and a half of coffee this morning on the couch and just thought, oh my gosh, are they going to pull this off? Because especially in the first 10 minutes of this match, Caroline, Spurs were not only the better side, the much better side. I mean, they had the ball, the passing combinations were there, the scoring chances were there. And then 11 minutes in, City get a goal, and you're just like, okay, this is what's going to happen. But it didn't turn, like the worm did not turn terribly. This was a very competitive, good 2-1 match that Spurs just kind of ended up on the short end of very late as City got another goal late, right?
Right. I'm really glad this was an entertaining game because I will admit I was exhausted this morning, and
the movies, they're just taking over our lives. We both
got back late from a movie, seriously considered just kind of dozing through the first half, but I got up and I was rewarded with an actually decent performance from Spurs women, which I'll be candid about it. I wasn't really expecting just based on how we've been playing, the strength of the opponent. But, maybe they really did get some sort of boost from the international break because they really came out. It looked like they wanted to get a result. And I think it's worth talking about the starting lineup for both teams because there were kind of some surprises. For Spurs, I feel like Charlie Grant getting a start at winger was very unexpected and maybe has something to do with her performance in the international break with Australia. Australia overall did not play very well, but Charlie kind of, had her moments in their game. So that was interesting. And then Evelina Summanen being back from her, kind of medium-term hamstring injury felt like a really, exciting prospect to finally see her back in the starting lineup. And Drew Spence starting as well. It felt like we were getting closer to our strongest midfield again, which we've not seen in quite a while. And then Ella Morris, also getting a start. She's kind of been making a name for herself with the England youth team. So I was really excited to see what she could do. And then for City, obviously Carolyn, one of their new signings, she's someone I'm very familiar with from watching NWSL. So I was curious to see how she was going to do. And Gareth Taylor, their manager, had made a lot of talk about resting his Japanese players potentially because they'd had, the long flight over from the US, and that did not end up being the case. And one of them went on to score. So kind of disappointing there. But yeah, like you said, I feel like we did kind of neutralize the threat of Bunny Shaw for once, which was refreshing to see. But, City are a team that is just so stacked that they have a lot of players who can do some damage. So, yeah.
I'm really glad you brought up Charlie Grant because as keen listeners of the Tottenham Depot will know, I got a chance to go out last week to see Australia play against the United States in the She Believes Cup. The game was here in Arizona. Went out, I caught the second half of the Japan Colombia match. It was Colombia, right? Japan and Colombia. And then watched the US Australia, and both Charlie Grant and Haley Rasso started for Australia. And I was kind of baffled at how bad Charlie Grant was in that game against the United States. Like, she was probably the one player on Australia who just couldn't find her footing. She went down with multiple knocks. I was surprised that she lasted the full 90 in that game. And honestly, I was delighted by Haley Rasso because Haley Rasso had an assist in that match, in a match that the US ended up winning 2-1. But Rasso had the assist, and she was just a real threat down the right wing side. For Charlie to come back and play in this match and not look terrible. I mean, the attack was working in this match, and I think that's the thing when I watched this match that I haven't seen a lot from Spurs women all year was just the patterns of play were there. The passing patterns were there. We've complained a lot about this team and what Robert Villahammer has tried to get going over the course of this season, and much of it has been simply down to not being able to string passes together, which sounds so rudimentary and so basic, but that's what it has come down to a lot for this club. And today, even in a defeat, I mean, we're going to talk about this positively for the most part, I think, even though it's a 2-1 defeat, which may sound strange, but when you're going up against City, a team that you've really struggled against, a team that's definitely above you in weight class, this I thought was strong. And it really just came down to, like I said, the patterns of play, the defensive effort was there. The goalkeeping was fairly solid as well, and the defending in front. We saw a goal line clearance from Ash Neville, which made me gasp. Like there was a hell of an effort put into this, and it sucks because it felt a little bit reminiscent of the men's game against City in that this felt, like I said at the top, this felt like just a missed opportunity because the effort was there, and City's second goal came with about maybe 10-15 minutes left, and Spurs didn't even fold after that. Like there were still chances, even down to the last kick of the ball. Beth in England had a chance very late to tie and couldn't come up with it. So it just, I don't know. I'm trying to be positive about this one because we haven't really been that positive about Spurs women in the past few weeks because the efforts have not been there. But it's a third straight WSL defeat. They're still just kind of very middle of the table. But I don't know. I liked this effort and I liked this performance for them, especially coming off of an international break. And we were talking about it right before we started recording. Unfortunately, there will be another layoff for the next game because the FA Cup weekend is next weekend, which Spurs are not taking part in. So it's another 2 weeks. And that's part of the struggle about this too, is that you can't really get any momentum off of this because there's such a long layoff in between the games right now.
Yeah, there's several things I want to respond to there. Good points that you brought up, because I do think it is almost impossible to string together any sort of momentum in this league in the spring, winter into spring time of period, because most of the teams, they're already out of the cups. We're in that boat too, unfortunately, this season. And you just have, kind of like 1 weekend on, 1 weekend off. It could be a good thing for us this time in the sense that we did apparently have 20 first team players out on international duty. So at least in this, weekend coming up where we're off, the whole team will be available to train. So maybe Wilhelm can use that as an opportunity to continue working on those, passing patterns, and a little bit of defense, just to sprinkle that in there. But it's interesting you brought up Haley Rosso, because, she and Charlie did link up for a goal in their last game for Australia, which I believe was against Colombia. And now I just have realized Haley wasn't in the squad at all today.
Wasn't even in the squad. Yep.
I realized she didn't start, but I didn't realize she wasn't even on the bench. So that's a curious one. Hopefully no sort of knock coming out of, Australia duty. But I do think Ash, with that goal line clearance and just her game in general, I felt like was a really good response to the previous game where it was not her best work. And I feel like having that kind of game in her sort of milestone appearance probably smarted for her. And I think she really responded well to that today. But yeah, I think in general, just like I said, having those key midfielders back really helped us to get some control of the game that has been sorely missing. Like Drew Spence especially, I think, is really important when it comes to like linking the defense and the attack. It was a shame Evelina couldn't play the whole game, but, coming off her injury, it makes sense to manage her minutes. And we did also get to see quite a bit of Olivia Holt, even though she didn't start because she came in for Martha Thomas after she got an early knock. And I pretty much loved everything we saw from Olivia. I feel like she's just such a strong technical player. And if we can get her, playing consistently, like I feel like she's really going to help raise the bar in terms of, the team's overall ability to progress the ball and, set up those attacking chances. And even, Maite Roth, when she came on as a sub, put in a really brilliant pass. So I feel like I've been very down on the squad lately, but this game kind of showed me like we do have some really great players that we can build around. The question is just going to be what happens in the summer. Like, are we going to actually take a step forward, since Robert is always talking about taking steps? So we'll see.
Yeah, the bones are good. I mean, the bone, there's a spine here. There's players to build on and work with. It's just a matter of like supplementing that with more of them. I mean, you can't rely on Bethany England to do it all, which she has been doing. Another goal, and
she almost did today.
She almost did do it all. You're right. I'm glad you brought up Holt too, because she comes up with the assist for England's goal, and came on for Martha Thomas and looked really strong. And you brought up Neville. I think those are the three players that really stood out. But again, there was something about watching this game where you expected City to be first to every ball, and they just simply weren't. And that was encouraging. And like I said, I'm not trying to dumb it down to like Spurs were able to string together passes and that's what made them look good. But that is kind of what it came down to in certain aspects.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we've not been doing in previous games against the top teams. And, from that sense, it's kind of frustrating to think about, I know we've been missing some players, but still you feel like some of the players who were there should have been doing a better job. But if having these players back from injury is kind of the morale boost that we needed, then I'm glad it's happening. And in terms of, kind of preventing City from getting too much of a foothold in the game, I think Ella Morris was really important in terms of like her pressing actions. Mm-hmm. And I feel like she's a player who just has such a high ceiling. You still see some of her like youthful inexperience cropping up at moments. But I do think having her back in the starting lineup has been really helpful. And also it was nice to see Ash on the left side, which we haven't seen in a while. I still would like to see her higher up the pitch, kind of in like the role that Charlie Grant was playing today. But I think for whatever reason, Robert sees her as more of a defender and he's sticking to it. So at least she was on her preferred side today.
Well, and like I said, based on what I saw from Grant last week playing left back, no, thank you. Like that was rough. That was a rough watch, but who knows? I mean, I think the flexibility is key too. Like these players can kind of move around and do a lot. So like I said, it's Brighton in 2 weeks. Like there's another layoff because of the FA Cup. So that's what's next up for Spurs women. There's a couple of other news and notes though that we want to get to on the women's side of things, including just a really, really strange move that popped out of nowhere yesterday. Becky Spencer has made a surprise emergency loan move to Chelsea of all clubs. First of all, didn't even know this was a thing. like emergency loan moves. That's news to me. Secondly, Chelsea, really? Like that's what we're doing? We're going to Chelsea. Thirdly, I think it's just it's a weird fall from grace because Becky Spencer has just slowly and methodically moved down the pecking order, and she's been, she was the starter, like, and all of a sudden is just being shipped away to, I guess, play maybe a little bit for Chelsea now. What do you make of this? This was just like came completely out of nowhere and is also just like, what? It's one of those moves that I just am baffled by.
Yeah, I'll say it was really rude news to wake up to yesterday. And there's just so much to unpack here because I immediately was kind of like, how are they even allowed to do this? Because I'm not unfamiliar with the concept of emergency loans. Like my local team had to do this one season in the playoffs, but that was kind of like a special exemption they were granted because it was the playoffs. And they had to select a goalkeeper from a team that was not in the playoffs. So, it is weird with this happening outside the transfer window that they're able to, take a player on loan from a team that is also currently competing. Like I could understand it if it was a free agent, a player from a league that, is in preseason right now, like in WSL or the Swedish league. Yeah, this just came as like a complete surprise to me. And obviously Becky has history with Chelsea because she played there previously. So, I mean, I guess I can see it from her perspective of if she sees this as a chance to get some game time, it's a club she's familiar with. Like, I understand that, but I do not understand it from the club's perspective. It feels like, why are we helping, a team that is already much better than us and do not need any help? And it's strange because they do still have two keepers. They've got Hannah Hampton, they've got a younger player whose name I can't recall right now, but yeah, I'm just kind of confused about why, with the surplus of goalkeepers that they already had, they've been allowed to make this move. And I don't know. Becky has had just a strange season because she had a pretty strong campaign last year. Obviously, we know the FA Cup final was pretty much a disaster for her. But, I felt like she could still kick on this season. And even when she's been playing internationally, she just picked up a clean sheet over the break. So I don't know. It seems like she has fallen out of favor at Tottenham. And, part of that is Lisa Kopp coming in, obviously, and right away taking that first keeper spot. But yeah, it's just a little confusing to me, frankly.
Yeah, it's bizarre. And I think it probably just is it feels just like it's an on-ramp to the end of her Spurs tenure at this point. Like I feel like there's no doubt that she's moving on. Which is
strange because she just signed a new contract. So we have to think about that too, in terms of, what is the plan? Are we going to be trying to move her on for a fee this summer, which it sounds like may be the case. The other thing that just occurred to me is that this now leaves us with two senior keepers. So again, what the hell, Tottenham?
Well, and one of them obviously being a very young academy product. Like it's not like she's got all the experience in the world, talking about heaps, obviously. Like it's not, if she gets pressed into duty, and it's not like we haven't seen her be pressed into duty, but like if she gets pressed into more long-term duty, like who knows what happens after that. Yeah, it's a very, very strange move, among many strange moves, because the other big piece of news this week is a report in The Guardian that the Women's Super League is considering scraping relegation altogether in this proposal to expand and kind of almost combine with the second tier, which is currently called the Women's Championship, but they want to rebrand that to be WSL2, like all kinds of moving parts here with the new company that has taken over the Super League. Walk me through this, because I read this article and I was like, I don't know how any of this passes the muster. I don't understand how fans will respond to this, because it feels very super league-ish from what we saw with the men's stuff a few years ago with UEFA. It feels there's a little bit of a smell of that going on here within the Women's Super League, and I don't know that I like it. It feels kind of icky to me.
Yeah, I don't think the fan response is going to be positive. It already isn't positive. And I think that since WPLL have taken over the leagues, that has kind of been a trend that they're not listening to fans and not understanding what women's football fans are actually looking for in the WSL. So right off the bat, it's just like, the trust has broken down already, which is not good. And, they gathered all the clubs from the WSL and the championship together at the end of this, past week to discuss it. But there was no sort of indication that it was going to be put up to a vote. Like, it's all been kind of shadowy what the process is around making this decision or not. It's totally possible that they're, putting this out there and will hear the fan response and back down. But, part of the rationale that, they're saying for taking away relegation in order to, kind of expand the league, like to continue having teams be promoted but not go down so that we can increase the numbers in both leagues. It's just kind of silly to me that they think it's going to encourage investment, because that's kind of the line they're going with, not having to worry about relegation is going to encourage clubs to invest. That does not make any sense to me, quite frankly. And we already
It feels like it would do the opposite to me, right?
Exactly.
Like it feels like I'm putting myself in Daniel Levy's shoes right now. If I don't have to worry about being relegated, why put more into a product that I'm already not putting a lot of investment into? Like that is
the key point.
Okay.
Like we've got clubs like Tottenham, like Liverpool, who are kind of an interesting case alongside ourselves because they just sacked their manager, and he's kind of in the same boat Robert Villaham is in terms of kind of being expected to work with very little support in terms of investing in the playing squad. So, I think that these clubs are going to be very happy to, be in a closed league and not have to put that investment in. And Daniel Levy's already on record as wanting a closed league. I think that was like last season that news report came out. So, yeah, I just think it's very naive, and I don't think it's going to be good for the lower leagues either, who are already kind of struggling to gain a foothold. And there's also kind of concerns about who's going to be selected for promotion to the WSL, because you've got clubs like, for example, Durham, they're an independent club, one of the very few in women's football. And they have been working really hard to get close to, merit-based promotion. They're close to the top of the table in the championship. But then you've got a club like Newcastle, who, through, shall we say, sports washing like methods, have been rapidly rising through the pyramid. And, is the WPLL going to see them as a better, pick for the WSL from a promotion, like marketing standpoint, than a club like Durham that don't have that reputation? So it's all going to get very thorny and ugly, I think, if they go with this route. And I think the big thing too is that English fans are very concerned about sort of like the Americanization of women's football. And, you and I, we both watch NWSL. We love this league. We know that the closed system can have its benefits, but it can also have its downsides. And I just don't think it's going to work in England because, they're not as comfortable with having like the concept of playoffs at the end of every season. Like that's one of the things that makes it feel competitive, even when, only one team's going to get the shield, of course, but
right.
There's something else for teams to fight for. So it's not a situation where you just got, teams giving up midseason because they have no hope of, doing anything in terms of the title. So I'm very against it, basically.
I think it would be a little bit different if there was an actual playoffs. It gives you something to play for, but just the idea of closing things off and,
and there's been no talk of that. So
And look, we talked about the lack of games, and look, we come on here all the time and bitch about how many games that they have to play on the men's side. Well, the opposite problem is the case on the women's side a lot of times, because it's a smaller league. There aren't as many games. We were just talking about it earlier. Spurs women have literally played every other week now for like the last 2 months. It feels like 3 months. Like there's not enough games to get a rhythm. So I'm for expanding the WSL if that's possible to do, even if you do it in an incremental way. Like if you want to say we're not going to relegate teams for the next however many years, but we're going to promote one every year, I'm fine with doing something like that. And I know that's been part of one of the proposals as well. If you're trying to expand the league and get more teams involved in this top tier, but completely shutting things off and just making it a closed system is, I don't think that's going to fly. It's not going to fly with me. It's not going to fly with the majority of fans. So it certainly is going to be something to watch, because I feel like enough people will raise a stink. I mean, enough people rose a stink about the Super League and shut that down a few years ago. So I don't think, I think we need to like carry some water here for this as well, and not allow this kind of thing to happen if that is the will of the fan, and that's the will of the fan should come out in these cases. You want to move on to talk about the men's game from Wednesday, because this was another one when we talk about like, okay, like the effort was there. This was a really youthful 11. I think that's where we need to start here too. This starting 11 was a little bit of a surprise to me, because it featured no Dejan Kulusevski, no Heung-min Son, no Jed Spence, which I think was the most kind of pertinent thing to talk about with the fullbacks, because I thought the fullbacks in this match in Poro and Udogie were just simply not good. Boy, Jeremy Doku is good. Like there's no way you're going to stop him with Pedro Porro right now in the form that he's playing. And Savinho on the other side was very good as well. Really made Udogie look kind of like Udogie's looked all year, just slower and not great. But again, I want to be a little bit positive about the result of this match. It's a 1-0 defeat. Holland gets a pass into the net 11 or 12 minutes in on a good cross from Doku. And that was it. Like City really kicked ass in the first half, but the second half, Tottenham were the better team and just couldn't get the ball across the line to equalize, even though kind of similar to the women's game, there were many opportunities to do so. What was your take on not only the 11, but just the way that this game played out in general? Because I thought it was, like I said, I'm going to stick with that theme of just an opportunity missed. This felt like, oh, City are not that much better than Tottenham at this moment, but they were able to get this one over the line.
No, I fully agree that this is probably the weakest City team we've seen in a long time. They don't have the juice, it seems like, without Rodri in their midfield. And I think it is a missed opportunity in the sense that I don't fully agree with Ange's decision to rotate so many key players out of the starting lineup. I do feel like he prioritized the Ipswich game as kind of the more winnable fixture, but I do feel like he should have seen this one as very winnable, especially knowing that we had, a week in between this game and the Europa League away leg, which obviously is like one of the biggest games of our season at this point. Like we have to do well in that one. But I think there's a difference between resting players and maybe not taking advantage of an opportunity to keep them sharp when they were going to be getting that sort of built-in rest coming up anyway. And I do feel like, the attack struggled. It's not that we didn't see kind of good things individually from the players, but it wasn't really working in a cohesive manner. Especially I think Odegaard and Johnson, like they really weren't connecting at all. And I agree with you. I think the fullbacks were a huge part of the problem. Like we've really been relying on Jed Spence a lot in terms of kind of progressing the ball. And to me, the fact that he didn't start, that was probably the biggest surprise. Because, I do feel like Son and Kulusevski, they've been playing so much lately that I can see the argument for letting them have the rest. But yeah, I really would have liked to see Jed and, because he's been on such a great run. And it does feel like a missed opportunity. I feel like we should have had this one.
Well, and look, I can see the argument too for Jed. I looked back earlier in the week at Jed Spence's minutes as well, and he's played a lot too. Like, there's no doubt that getting him a rest was part of the priority for Postecoglou as well. But boy, you saw when he came on in the second half, in about 65 or so minutes in, like, he changed. The Spurs were already on top in the second half and already starting to really find their way. He kicked it into a whole new gear. And again, it didn't result in anything on the score line, but Jed Spence looked so good when he came on. I thought that even Kulusevski and Son, when they came on, they looked fresh, they looked bright. Like, you can see where Postecoglou's thought was there in trying to just hang on and get these guys on in a more limited role in this match and maybe get something from it. Truly, I felt like a point was deserved from this match, even if it wasn't earned. But I the fullback thing, when you're going up against, and to me, if I'm looking at that City side, the one player I'm worried about is Doku. Obviously Haaland, returning from injury as well, but he really didn't do much despite scoring the goal. Like, he was fairly well shut down. I thought Kevin Danso did a pretty good job on him in the middle there, other than the one moment where they didn't, the one moment where they lost him. But gosh, overall, I mean, you're still looking at a City side that was able to bring on Bernardo Silva, Phil Foden, Jack Grealish, Gundogan. Like, all these players came off the bench for City in this match, and it was still a match where you're like, oh man, I thought we had that one. I thought we really could have. And the confidence is obviously there too. I mean, there was all this talk about going undefeated against the Manchester teams this year in 6 opportunities, and instead it's 5 wins from 6. So yeah, it stinks, but I'm trying not to like get too downtrodden about this. Like, the league position is what it is. They're still in 13th. They're still just scrapping right now at trying to get back into that top half and maybe make a late push. There are still enough games left where you're like, maybe they can make a run. Yeah. I mean, the result of this match, unfortunately, did officially eliminate Spurs mathematically from winning the title. So that is now out of the question. Shucks, I know. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's one of those where I can't get too broken up about it, but I do want to see them push forward. I just thought the rotation side of this was a little disappointing, especially now that there is a little bit of a break in schedule, as you mentioned. Like, we played last Wednesday, don't have another game till Thursday, but it is a Thursday coming up because of the Europa League, and you really want to put your focus into that. I get all of the arguments. It's just, like I said, I keep coming back to missed opportunity, because this was there for them, even to get a point. Like, I would have been completely satisfied with scraping a point from this for the effort. That felt like the fair result to me.
Well, and we almost did, because just like the women's game, we had an opportunity to equalize at the death that just didn't work out. And, I think one thing that was weird about this game was that a lot of our big chances were headers. And it feels like without a Richarlison or a Solanke in the team, that's just not going to be.
Well, Kevin Danso was doing his damnedest. I mean, I'll tell you, he had a couple of really good chances with the head, for sure.
Yes,
and
on the set pieces, for sure.
He's been bright for me. I've liked what I've seen from him.
I don't think he had as strong a game as the previous one, but I still feel like he's doing the job. Like, he's come in, no complaints, just taking advantage of his opportunity. So I like that. But I do agree. I think since we were coming off kind of that, winning streak, and if we had been able to get a result in this one, that would have been some really nice momentum to carry into the Europa League, which, as we know, is really, the be all or end all of our season at this point. So, yeah.
What did you make of Timo Werner coming on late in this match? That was a little bit of a, what are we doing? What are we even doing here moment for me.
Yeah, I not much is what I made of it, except disappointment that Dane Scarlett didn't get those minutes. I really would have preferred to see him, because, we know he's an inexperienced player compared to Timo, but I feel like in terms of the work rate, the effort, the motivation, frankly, like, it just doesn't make sense to me to be giving Werner these minutes anymore. Give Dane the development. That's how I feel.
Obviously, he's not going to be able to play Thursday, but I didn't need to see him in this match, and that was disappointing and frustrating to me, seeing that happen. I agree. I would have much rather seen Dane Scarlett, but Timo still, for some reason, has a place on this team, and that's kind of where we're at. It was very strange for me, though. So I don't know. That bothered me a little bit. Other news from the week, which was a little weird for me. I saw that the London Football Awards were Thursday night, and Archie Gray was honored as the Men's Young Player of the Year. I find it very strange that we're giving out season-ending awards in late February is when this was, and it's just very bizarre for me. But obviously, Archie Gray has been a godsend for this club, and even though he's been playing out of position pretty much the entire year, a cool honor for him, and obviously has been a stalwart at center back. I'm still a little bit confused because I there's all these people talking about, when Romero and Van de Ven can eventually come back, maybe we can move Archie Gray into the midfield and into more of a 6 role. I don't know. I think for right now, I've just really loved what I've seen from Archie Gray at center back. What's your thoughts on Archie Gray long term?
Well, in the long term of this season, I think that once our starting center backs come back, he's probably going to be getting fullback minutes instead, because Ange has also relied on him, to cover at those positions as well. And I unfortunately think it's going to have to wait until next season for him to really get his chance in the midfield. But he's taking it as kind of a silver lining that he's getting to learn these new positions. And he's talked about how much he's learning about different aspects of the game because of that. So it is aiding in his development in a way. It's just not, ideal that he's not getting some chances in the midfield. But I mean, yeah, he obviously deserved this award. I don't think there's a lot of time left in the season, but I don't think anybody else is going to distinguish himself as much as he has already this season. So yeah, well deserved.
And the news was kind of, the Archie Gray news is obviously great and kudos to him. But there was also a report this week that Spurs are, for some reason, discussing a new contract potentially with Rodrigo Bentancur, which further complicates this club's midfield for the long term. I know I saw you just roll your eyes when I mentioned this name. This is puzzling to me, although to some extent, I can understand why the club would feel a need to extend a player like Bentancur just from a value standpoint. Both Bentancur and Basuma are in their late 20s. They both have deals that will expire after next season. And I think that if you're going to choose between the two of them to extend, I would lean toward Bentancur over Basuma. It does kind of seem like even Basuma's moved himself further down the pecking order. We have not really seen or heard from him much of late, but I guess if you're choosing between the two of them from just a depth standpoint, or from let's get this guy a new contract so that maybe adds a little value to a sell on, all of those things I'm in favor of. But boy, the defensive midfielder role still seems to be just a mystery. And that's why I brought up Archie Gray, because a lot of people think, oh, just slide him into that number 6 role and go from there. But I don't know that it's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he's just not been playing there. So I do think he's going to need a preseason kind of specializing in that position to really, get acclimated in terms of like what Ange wants from that position. I agree with you that if it's only going to be one of our current, number 6s leaving in the summer, I would much rather it be Basuma. But I would rather see both of them go, frankly. So
Yeah.
and I do kind of poke fun at people having like Daniel Levy trauma in terms of like, moving players on. But I do worry that if we give him a new contract, we're going to be stuck with this guy for a while, because I don't actually think the market for him is going to be as active as we might think. So.
Well, and I think that that's the other really big problem, is that the market for these number 6s, like these players that can come in and just be stalwarts. I mean, we saw the deal that Spurs did for Johnny Cardozo, the American, with Betis. Like that's still on the table as well. Spurs could just go out and bring Johnny Cardozo in this summer as well. I don't know that solves anything. There's a lot of people who are high on Cardozo, but also there's a lot more who don't think that he's a Premier League player. So the market for me is the biggest question mark in trying to solve this part of the pitch, because it is kind of like there's a lot of options at wing. We're starting to see there's more options in attack. There's, Madison and Bergvall, like are midfielders that we still think have something to offer, especially going forward. But it's really just that number 6 role, that stalwart that you want protecting the center backs, that seems to be like a big shrug emoji for Ange Postecoglou right now. And I don't know that there is a perfect answer. So maybe keeping Bentancur around, because Bentancur can do a job. Like, I know we've all had our issues with Bentancur for myriad reasons, but like he was really good in this match against City. Like we've seen, and I think we've also seen in the last handful of weeks, something developing between he and Bergvall. I mentioned it last week, I know, after the Ipswich match. The two of them were very good against Ipswich. Maybe there's something there, and maybe if we can get the health thing and just the stupidity thing out of him, like maybe there's still something to be said. But he's also a player in his late 20s where, you got to start getting a little bit younger in some of these spots too. So it's just kind of a big mystery as to what they're going to try there. And I think the market speaks to how difficult it is to find really, really quality players in that part of the pitch. And maybe Spurs are seeing that there's just not a lot out there that's within their grasp and are trying to hold on to what they have to keep going forward. That's the only real explanation I can come up with and think of off the top, but certainly something else to kind of monitor going forward. Going forward, we've got AZ Alkmaar on Thursday in the Europa League. I'm kind of hoping that we might see an injury return. There are a few names out there that are still yet to return and lingering. We got word last week before the City match that the players like Richarlison, Christian Romero, Mickey Van de Ven, Dominic Solanke are all about a week to a week and a half away, and it just so happens that this game is falling kind of right in that window. So it's Alkmaar on Thursday away. Spurs will return home for Bournemouth on Sunday, and then the second leg against Alkmaar the following Thursday. Are you looking for any of these players to come in and make a difference? Because I think it would be a really, really nice boost, especially if they could get one of those center backs back into the fold. Maybe you get a Danzo Van de Ven pairing or something like that. That would really go a long way, I think, into making this squad stronger going into what are the two most important matches that they have left. And hopefully they can create two more after that by winning.
Yeah, I think this would be a great chance for Mickey to get back into the squad because, this is not the most difficult opposition. So a good game to ease his hamstrings back in. And I would be curious to see how he played with Danzo, because I think, Danzo, we've seen kind of glimpses of him kind of trying to do some of that playing out from the back that we see from Romero, who's usually partnering with Van de Ven. So I think there's actually potential for them to be a good partnership, and I would like to see that, play out. But yeah, I think Ange just has to kind of go with the strongest lineup available, because if we can, get the goal advantage in this away leg, that's going to set us up really well. And obviously we beat them in the past, so that bodes well. And I don't think the Troy Parrott revenge tour is really a thing per se. So
you just can't get Troy Parrotted. That's all. That's the main key. And of course, Bournemouth on the weekend is going to be an important one as well. We'll be back to talk about both of those next week. Anything else you got to get off your chest here, Caroline, before we call it a pod for the week?
No, I just, I hope we can continue seeing the improved performances from both teams, because I think, this past week, not great results, but at least encouraging in terms of, seeing some of the players getting back to what we would like to see.
I don't know that we've ever had such a positive podcast after 2 defeats to talk about, but I think we managed to accomplish it. And you haven't thrown weird. Like a really, it's very weird. And you haven't thrown like a really difficult question right here at the end, like Todd would normally do, which I appreciate, because I don't need to be distracted. I just want to go carve out 4 hours to watch The Brutalist at this point and call it a day. Like, that's all I want to do. So it's kind of perfect.
I wish you good luck with that.
Yeah, I don't know that it's going to get done before Conan O'Brien takes the stage in LA tonight, but we'll eventually get it done. Again, a happy Oscar Sunday to everyone who's a movie enthusiast like the two of us, and a Tottenham enthusiast as well, because we certainly appreciate all the support. Be sure to check out all our episodes on our YouTube page if you like watching the podcast, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. And leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice to help spread the word about the show. You can follow us on all the socials at Tottenham Depot. You can follow Caroline at CG Stefko. You can follow me at A Stetka. We will be back next week to chat about those two men's games and whatever other news pops up, as I'm sure there will be plenty. We'll talk to you then. This has been the Tottenham Depot podcast. As always, come on, you Spurs.